I'm going to tell you exactly what happened between me and my husband, because I'm still trying to understand how something that once felt so perfect managed to collapse right under my feet. My name is Kendra, I'm 28, and if you had asked me half a year ago, I would have sworn I'd built the kind of marriage other women envied. Austin and I had this rhythm, this closeness, this passion that made me feel chosen every single day. Or, at least, that's what I used to believe. 6 months later, I'm sitting here wondering how the hell I went from being adored to being the villain in my own marriage. And the worst part? I didn't even see it happening. In the beginning, Austin's affection felt like the dream version of love, warm, physical, constant. He'd tell me how gorgeous I looked before I'd even finished brushing my hair. He'd smack my butt when I walked past him in the kitchen, hug me from behind while I cooked, kiss my neck just because he couldn't help himself. It wasn't creepy. It wasn't pushy. It was passionate and sweet and very him. He reacted to me. Not in a demanding way, just in that natural, very male way where his body responded before his brain caught up. And at first, God, I loved it. My friends would roll their eyes and say things like, "Must be nice to have a husband who still acts like he's dating you." I'd laugh, pretending to be humble, but inside I felt smug. Lucky. Chosen. Desired. But life doesn't stay light forever. Work got unbearable. My mom's health spiraled. My sleep was trash. And the energy it took to simply function left nothing in the tank for unpredictably horny affection. That's when Austin's touch started to feel different. Not wrong. Not threatening. Just heavy, like every hug came with an expectation I didn't have the bandwidth for. His body reacted so fast, so easily, so automatically, and suddenly I couldn't tell the difference between affection and desire. And I was tired. Exhausted, really. I wanted comfort, not escalation. Warmth, not intensity. A hug, not a sexual spark. But instead of saying any of that out loud, I just quietly pulled back and hoped he would magically sense the shift. Spoiler, he didn't. How could he? The man was loving me the exact same way he always had. Meanwhile, I was silently drowning in stress, resenting something I used to brag about. That resentment built and built, completely unnoticed by him, and completely unacknowledged by me. And without realizing it, I was setting the stage for everything to blow up. I just didn't know how bad the explosion was going to be. It happened on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic day. Not a holiday. Not an anniversary. Just a completely ordinary, miserable Tuesday at the end of a long line of miserable days. Work had chewed me up and spat me out. I walked through the door drained, brittle, wanting nothing more than silence, food, and maybe 2 hours of mindless TV with my husband. Austin noticed immediately, because of course he did. He always noticed everything about me. He made dinner without asking questions, let me vent, didn't push. He was gentle in all the ways I thought I needed. After we ate, I sat on the couch trying to decompress, and he came over and began massaging my shoulders. His hands were steady, warm, familiar. At first, it felt like the exact kind of affection I'd been craving, calming, grounding, easy. But then he leaned down and kissed my neck. Softly, tenderly, affectionately. And then, his hands slid down my arms, his body pressed closer, and like clockwork, I felt him responding to me. That involuntary, physical reaction that had once made me feel powerful and desired now felt like one more thing demanding something from me when I had absolutely nothing left to give. Something inside me snapped. Not a little crack. Not a sigh or a subtle pull away. A break. Sharp. Final. Ugly. I whipped around and said the words that detonated my marriage in a single breath. "You always sexualize me. And it's disgusting." I can still see the way his face emptied, like someone wiped all the expression clean off it. Not anger. Not confusion. Just hurt. Real, deep, stunned hurt. He stepped back slowly, like he'd been physically pushed. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost gentle. "I can't help that I'm attracted to my wife, Kendra. I'm a healthy man. This is normal." But I wasn't listening. I was too stressed. Too overwhelmed. Too ready to unload everything I'd been harboring for weeks. I doubled down. You can't just touch me without getting turned on. It's irritating. I can't get a normal hug from you. It's gross. Gross. That was the word that broke him. His expression shifted not into anger, but into something far worse. Recognition. Like he'd just learned a painful truth about himself he could never unlearn. He stood there for a long moment, breathing quietly, thinking, absorbing. Then he said, very calmly, "Okay, I understand." And he went to bed. No argument. No defensiveness. No guilt-tripping. Just acceptance. It should have relieved me. It didn't. I sat on the couch afterward, feeling equal parts justified and nauseous. My chest was tight, my stomach twisted. I knew, even before anything changed, that I'd said something cruel. Something deeply wounding. But I was too exhausted and too proud to take it back. I had no idea those 4 words, "it's gross, it's disgusting," weren't just going to hurt him. They were going to rewrite the entire foundation of our marriage. And the very next morning, I would wake up next to a man who had already begun disappearing from me. The next morning, Austin didn't kiss me awake the way he usually did. There was no warm hand on my hip. No playful squeeze. No sleepy morning baby into my neck. Just absence. A quiet, clean absence that felt foreign in our bedroom. He was already up, already dressed, already moving through the house with a kind of careful distance that made my stomach twist. He wasn't cold. He wasn't angry. He was measured. Like he'd recalibrated something overnight. When I walked into the kitchen, he gave me a soft, polite smile, the kind you give a neighbor, not a wife. "Good morning, Ken." Ken. He hadn't called me that since the first year we dated, back when he was still testing what he could call me. Something about it made my skin prickle. He slid a cup of coffee toward me with this professional sort of gentleness, then stepped back like he was respecting invisible boundaries. Ones I had drawn without realizing the consequences. I tried to brush it off as lingering hurt from last night, but as the day went on, the difference became impossible to ignore. No playful touches. No affectionate glances. No reaching for my waist when he passed behind me. No leaning in to smell my hair. No letting his hand rest on my thigh while we watched TV. He didn't retreat dramatically. If anything, that would have been easier to process. Instead, he adjusted. Perfectly. Effortlessly. Immediately. Every physical instinct he had, he shut down. He still talked to me. Still helped with chores. Still asked about my mom. Still laughed at my jokes. But the warmth had a missing core, like someone had removed the flame and left the shape of it behind. He spoke to me like a man who'd learned his affection was unwelcome and was now meticulously avoiding the slightest chance of crossing a line. And the worst part? I got exactly what I said I wanted. Hugs that were just hugs. Touch that didn't escalate. Closeness without heat. But it didn't feel comforting. It felt clinical. When he hugged me that night, if you could call it that, his arms were gentle but hollow, like he was being careful not to let his body respond at all. No chest-to-chest pressure. No lingering. No kiss to the top of my head. Just a hug. A neutral, non-intimate, tension-free hug. And for the first time, I felt a sharp, cold fear settle under my ribs. What if I had killed something in him? Not temporarily. Not accidentally. But fundamentally. I lay awake that night watching him sleep, curled on his side away from me, hands tucked under his pillow like he was trying to occupy as little emotional space as possible. I told myself this was what I needed. That this was healthier. That I should be relieved. But I wasn't. Because for the first time since we'd been together, Austin felt like a stranger sleeping in my bed. And it terrified me how quickly he could turn off a part of himself I never imagined he'd lose. It started with a question I couldn't stop asking myself. Why is this happening? I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself it was just stress, that it would pass. But by the third night, the silence between us had grown so loud that I could hear it in every corner of the house. Finally, I broke. "Austin, can we talk?" He looked up from his laptop, calm but alert. Like he'd been expecting me to ask, even if he didn't know exactly what I'd say. "Sure. What's up?" His voice was quiet, careful, not flat, but measured. I swallowed hard, feeling the words lump in my throat. I feel like there's distance between us. Like, you're holding back. He closed the laptop slowly and looked at me, really looked. And for the first time in days, I saw a flicker of something that wasn't just polite neutrality. I'm not holding back, he said softly. I'm trying to respect you. Respect me. I blinked. The words sounded innocent but landed heavy, like a verdict. I don't know what that means, I whispered. It means, he said, choosing his words like he was walking on glass, that I can feel you pulling away. And I don't want to push you. But I also can't pretend nothing's changed. The air between us was taut, electric, and suffocating. I realized in that moment that I had been passive-aggressively shutting him out, hoping he'd notice the shift, hoping he'd adjust himself to my stress without a single word from me. And now here he was, standing in front of me, transparent and calm, while I was the one drowning in guilt. I feel like I need space sometimes, I admitted, my voice breaking a little. I need to, breathe without feeling like I have to respond to you all the time. He nodded slowly. I get that. I didn't know it was that bad. I thought, maybe I was annoying you. It hit me like a punch to the chest. Annoying? The man who used to worship me, who used to melt at my touch, who used to laugh at me like I was the funniest person alive, thought he was annoying. And part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to curl into myself and disappear. I didn't mean, you're not annoying, I tried to clarify. But the words sounded hollow, even to me. It's okay, he said, his tone steady, but so achingly sad that it carved a hollow in my chest. I can tell you need something different. I'll try to give you that. I just don't want to lose you. And there it was. That subtle, fragile thread I had forgotten existed, his vulnerability. I wanted to reach for it. I wanted to fix everything. But I didn't know how. We sat there, two people in the same house, talking about love and boundaries and exhaustion, realizing, terrifyingly, that even when you speak, sometimes words aren't enough. The conversation ended without resolution. Not in a fight, not in tears, not in blame. Just quiet understanding. And sometimes, I think, that quiet understanding is the hardest thing of all. After that conversation, things didn't explode immediately. There was no fiery argument, no dramatic scene. But the cracks, they widened in quiet, almost imperceptible ways. I noticed it in the mornings. Austin would smile at me over coffee, and I'd feel a pang of guilt instead of warmth. His touch lingered for a second too long, and I flinched instead of melting. I noticed it in the evenings. He'd come home tired but still make an effort to check in, to ask about my day, to brush my hair back from my face. And I barely responded. My words were clipped, my laughs forced. I wanted to explain, to tell him that I wasn't rejecting him, that I was just exhausted, but somehow the words never came. I noticed it in the little things. The way he left dishes in the sink, the way he hummed while folding laundry, the way he would nudge my shoulder in passing. Every action became a test I didn't want to take, a burden I didn't have the energy to bear. And I hated myself for it. Because this wasn't Austin's fault. He hadn't done anything wrong. He hadn't stopped loving me, hadn't stopped trying, hadn't anything. The fault was mine. My tiredness. My resentment. My inability to communicate. But recognizing the fault doesn't make the weight any lighter. I felt like I was walking around in a fog, one foot in the marriage I loved, one foot in a distance I couldn't close. Every glance at him was a reminder of how far I'd let us drift. Every touch reminded me of how I'd allowed intimacy to become a minefield. And then there were the nights I couldn't sleep, when all the tension, all the unspoken words, all the tiny resentments I'd ignored came rushing in like a flood. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how easily a relationship can unravel, thinking about how fragile love really is, thinking about the choices we make, or fail to make, that set the stage for heartbreak. One night, I caught Austin standing at the doorway of our bedroom, just watching me sleep. Not in a possessive way, not in a voyeuristic way, just watching. His eyes were soft, but tired. And in that look, I saw everything I feared, patience stretched thin, affection strained, love hanging by a thread. I wanted to reach out, to pull him close, to tell him everything, but my pride and exhaustion formed a wall I couldn't climb. Those small, ordinary moments, the touch that felt heavy, the smile that felt forced, the silence that screamed, were what broke me. Not one monumental argument. Not one catastrophic betrayal. Just the accumulation of the quiet, everyday erosion of connection. By the time we realized how far we'd drifted, the gap felt like a canyon. And standing at the edge, looking down, I knew we were both teetering on the brink. I had rehearsed the words in my head 100 times before I finally managed to say them aloud. It was one of those nights where the apartment felt impossibly quiet, the kind of silence that presses into your chest until it's hard to breathe. Austin was on the couch, scrolling through his phone with a distracted intensity that made me ache. The house smelled faintly of the dinner we hadn't finished, garlic and burnt edges mingling with the lingering perfume of my frustration. "Austin, maybe we should try therapy," I said, my voice trembling slightly even as I tried to keep it steady. He froze mid-scroll, and I could see the way his fingers tightened around the device, knuckles pale. "Therapy?" His voice was careful, skeptical, like he was preparing himself to be defensive. "Kendra, I don't know if I have it in me anymore. I feel like I've hit the wall." The words landed like stones in my chest. I'd expected resistance, maybe even anger, but the raw weariness in his tones stabbed deeper than I'd imagined. I wanted to reach for him, to take his face in my hands and tell him it was okay to be tired. But instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat and tried to make the case calmly, carefully. "I get that," I said, sitting down across from him, keeping my voice soft. "I know you're exhausted. I know you feel like you've been running on empty for months. But I can't just keep drifting like this, Austin. I feel like we're floating farther and farther apart, and if we don't do something, I don't know where we'll end up." He looked away, jaw tight, shoulders hunched as if carrying all the unspoken months of frustration and silent resentment we'd both been collecting. I could feel it radiating off him, the exhaustion, the disappointment, the hurt that hadn't found a proper outlet. I wanted to touch him, to bridge the distance, but I hesitated. I didn't want to push. I just wanted him to see me, to see us. "I love you," I added, my voice breaking slightly despite my efforts. "I want us back. Not like before, not like some fairy tale version of ourselves, but back to the people we are together. I'm willing to fight for that. I'm willing to try, if you are hard as it might be." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant tick of a clock, the sound of my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I wanted him to respond, to say something that would tell me I wasn't alone in this, but for several moments, he just stared at the floor. Finally, he rubbed a hand over his face, fingers threading through his hair in a gesture I knew too well. "One more time," he said quietly, almost a whisper, almost afraid the words themselves might shatter. "For you. But I'm at my wit's end, Kendra. Don't expect miracles." I felt a rush of relief so intense it almost knocked me off my feet. One more time. That's all I'd asked for. One more chance. Not perfection. Not instant resolution. Just willingness. And there it was, fragile but real, bridging the gap between us. I wanted to hug him, to press my face into the curve of his neck and let the weight of relief and fear pour out in tears, but I held back, instead letting the silence stretch for a beat longer, letting him see that I understood his exhaustion. "That's all I need," I whispered. "One more time." That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the quiet of our bedroom and let the tears come. Not tears of despair, not tears of anger. Relief. Hope. Fear, too. But mostly hope, the first genuine glimmer I'd felt in months. It was fragile, yes, but it was enough to light a small path forward. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I could imagine us finding our way back. The first day of therapy felt awkward. The kind of awkward that makes your skin crawl, makes your stomach tighten, even when you've been the one pushing for it. I had convinced Austin to come, promising that it would be just one session, one more chance, and somehow he'd agreed. But the tension in the car ride there was palpable. The silence between us wasn't just quiet, it was charged, thick with months of unspoken grievances, misread gestures, and quiet resentments. When we stepped into the office, the therapist greeted us warmly, but even her smile couldn't immediately erase the tightness coiled in Austin's jaw or the tremor in my own hands. We sat on the couch, facing each other, a small coffee table acting as a fragile buffer between us. I caught myself taking a deep breath, the scent of the room, warm, faintly lavender, strangely comforting, and tried to focus on the present moment rather than all the mistakes of the past 6 months. "Let's start with what brought you here," the therapist said gently. Her voice wasn't demanding, just steady and soft, like she expected honesty and nothing less. I glanced at Austin, expecting him to scoff, to roll his eyes, maybe even refuse to speak. But he didn't. He just nodded, jaw tight, hands folded in his lap, and waited. I feel like we've drifted," I began, my voice quivering. "I can't tell where my exhaustion ends and my resentment begins. I don't want to feel resentful. I don't want to feel like I'm keeping score of who's giving more or less. I just want us back, even if it's not exactly how it was." Austin shifted, rubbing the back of his neck. I feel like I've failed," he said finally. "Like I couldn't give what you needed because I was burned out and you were distant. I don't know. I don't know where the fault starts and ends. His voice broke slightly and he swallowed. "I don't want to lose us. But I'm tired, Kendra. So tired." Hearing him admit that, raw and honest, made something loosen inside me. The therapist guided us to take turns, really listening to each other, not planning rebuttals, not shutting down at the first sharp word. I realized I'd spent months resenting him for things I hadn't voiced, while he'd spent months resenting me for pulling back in ways I hadn't explained. Therapy gave us a space where the words could finally live without judgment. We were clumsy at first, interruptions, tears, long pauses where the weight of silence seemed unbearable. But each small exchange felt like a tiny bridge being built across the chasm we'd been staring at for months. The therapist encouraged us to use "I feel" statements to describe our own emotions instead of blaming. It was almost laughably simple, yet terrifyingly hard. By the end of the first session, we didn't have a perfect solution. We didn't have a sudden spark of the old passion. But we had something more important: clarity. Austin admitted his exhaustion wasn't a reflection of me or our love, it was life pressing down, and my withdrawal wasn't rejection, just my way of coping. I admitted that my pullback had been silent and damaging, and that I needed to learn to ask for what I needed instead of hoping he'd read my mind. Walking to the car afterward, our hands brushed. It was tentative, cautious, but it lingered longer than it had in weeks. Austin looked at me, a small, almost shy smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I guess one more time isn't just for you," he said quietly. "It's for me too." I squeezed his hand, feeling a cautious optimism bloom in my chest. But we were moving. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I understood what I had done wrong and would steadily build my way to giving him what he should be getting. A fulfilling, satisfying marriage. And he also understood to how balance when the mood was right and when we needed to wait. Definitely the relationship therapy had been helping to get us back to the right track. Like and subscribe.